What if I told you that one of Street Outlaws' biggest stars didn't just lose his career, he lost everything, including potentially his freedom, over a $15 million judgment that will haunt him forever? John Odom, the man behind the world's fastest GTA, went from throwing around thousands in cash on national television to sitting in a jail cell, unable to pay $60,000 in basic alimony. But the real story isn't just about money, it's about a deadly party in Las Vegas, a cover-up that went horribly wrong, and secrets so dark they destroyed not just his racing career, but his entire life. I'm about to take you through one of the most shocking falls from grace in motorsports history. This isn't just another story about a celebrity losing money. This is about how a man's criminal past, built on deception and fraud, finally caught up with him in the most devastating way possible. We'll uncover the financial crimes that funded his racing empire, the tragic death that happened at his party, the disturbing personal secrets that his ex-wife revealed in court documents that will make your skin crawl. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how a man who seemed to have everything, fame, fortune, and the fastest car on the track ended up with a financial death sentence that ensures he can never return to professional racing. And trust me, the truth is far darker than anything you've seen on television. Let's start with the moment everything officially ended for John Odom. Picture this. You're sitting in a courtroom, and a judge is about to hand down a sentence that will destroy your life forever. But this isn't a criminal court, it's a civil court, and the sentence isn't measured in years behind bars. It's measured in dollars, nearly 15 million of them. The court ordered a default judgment against John Odom for the unbelievable amount of $988. Now here's what makes this even more devastating. Odom never even showed up to fight it. The court records show he was properly served with the lawsuit, but he completely ignored it. He didn't appear in court, didn't file an answer, and didn't even try to defend himself. By ignoring the lawsuit entirely, he was found in default, and the court sided with the plaintiff for the full amount. Think about what this means. This isn't just a large debt, this is a financial death sentence. For almost anyone on the planet, $15 million impossible to overcome. But for a man whose business empire was already in complete ruins, this was the final nail in the coffin. It was a clear signal that the money had run out, the fight was over, and there was no way back. But here's what's truly shocking about this situation. While this massive judgment was being entered against him, John Odom wasn't sitting at home counting his remaining money or trying to figure out how to pay his debts. He was already behind bars. This is where the story gets really disturbing. At the time this $50 million judgment was entered, Odom was locked up in the 80 County Jail in Idaho. But he wasn't there for some major crime that you might expect from a man facing such massive legal troubles. He was in jail for something that should have been pocket change for a TV star failing to pay $60,000 alimony. Let me put this in perspective for you. This is a man who raced a car worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, a car that cost a fortune to build and maintain, a man who threw around thousands of dollars in cash bets on national television like it was nothing, and he was sitting in a jail cell because he couldn't come up with $60,000 to pay his ex-wife. The court didn't give him any breaks either. He was held with no option for bail. Think about the psychology of this situation. This wasn't a choice he made. This was proof that his financial world had already completely crumbled. The well was dry. There was no money left to pay even this relatively smaller debt because much bigger problems were swallowing everything he had. He was already trapped by the legal system when that final multi-million-dollar blow landed, turning his prison cell from a temporary problem into a symbol of his permanent downfall. But money troubles and jail time weren't the darkest clouds gathering over John Odom's life. Now we get to the part of this story that transforms it from a tale of financial ruin into something much more sinister. In 2023, Las Vegas became the scene of what was supposed to be a celebration for John Odom. He hosted a Halloween party at the luxurious Resorts World Casino to honor a new sponsorship deal for his famous supercharged GTR. This party was meant to be a symbol of his success, a gathering of friends and financial backers in the city where high rollers come to play. But this night of celebration would turn into a morning of horror, leading to a death that would drag Odom into a scandal far darker than any financial crime he'd ever committed. One of the guests at that party was a man named Christopher Tapp, and his story is absolutely heartbreaking. Tapp had spent 20 years in prison for a murder he did not commit. 20 years of his life stolen. He was eventually proven innocent and set free, receiving a settlement of over $7 million from the city of Idaho Falls for his wrongful conviction. After 2 decades behind bars for a crime he didn't commit, Tapp was finally free and had the money to start building the life that had been taken from him. Here's where it gets really tragic. Tapp reportedly became a major financial backer for Odom Racing, using some of his hard-won settlement money to invest in what he thought was his friend's legitimate business. This man, who had already been failed by the system once, was putting his trust and his money into John Odom. But at that party in Las Vegas, tragedy found Christopher Tapp once again. According to police reports and a lawsuit filed later, another guest at the party, a former professional wrestler and a political candidate named Dan Rodimer, was involved in a violent altercation with Tapp. The fight was brutal. Tapp was severely injured and eventually taken to the hospital, where he died from his injuries. The Clark County coroner later ruled his death a homicide caused by brain bleeds from blunt force trauma to the head. A man who had survived 20 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit lost his life at a party meant to celebrate a race car. But here's where John Odom's role in this tragedy becomes truly disturbing. According to the lawsuit filed by Christopher Tapp's mother, Vera Tapp, John Odom was in the master bedroom when the attack happened. But it's what allegedly happened after the fight that paints a chilling picture of the man behind the Street Outlaws' smile. The lawsuit claims that after the violent altercation, Odom came out of the room and ordered the other party guests not to call hotel security or the police. Think about that for a moment. A man is dying or seriously injured, and instead of immediately calling for help, Odom allegedly made it clear that no one was to alert the authorities. But the story gets even more disturbing. A comment on Reddit, reportedly from someone familiar with the case, adds a chilling detail. It claims that when help was finally called, Odom told police a completely different story. He allegedly said that he saw Tapp fall on a pair of slippers, but when police investigated the room, they found no slippers anywhere. This detail, if true, suggests a deliberate attempt to mislead police and create a false narrative about what really happened to his friend and financial backer. For a man like Christopher Tapp, who had already been failed by the justice system once before, the idea that his so-called friend would try to cover up the truth of his death is a final, heartbreaking betrayal. Now, John Odom has denied everything. When asked for comment, he claimed he wasn't even at the party when the fight happened, and that being named in the lawsuit was simply a mistake. This creates a direct conflict of stories. On one side, you have a lawsuit from a grieving mother and witness accounts, and on the other, you have Odom's complete denial. But here's the question that reveals everything. Why would Odom allegedly try to stop people from calling for help? Why would he allegedly lie to police about what happened? The answer connects directly to his failing business empire and his desperate need for Christopher Tapp's money. What I'm about to tell you will completely change how you see John Odom's entire Street Outlaws career. His recent troubles, the bankruptcy, the jail time, the homicide investigation might seem like a sudden fall from grace. But when you dig into his past, you discover this isn't a new story at all. The foundation of his life, both in business and on the track, was built on a pattern of deception that started long before he ever appeared on television. John Odom was a convicted felon long before he was a TV star. Court records from Idaho show that back in 2002 he pleaded guilty to 3 counts of writing bad checks and 1 count of grand theft. But that wasn't the end of it. At the same time, he was facing even more serious trouble in Louisiana, where he was arrested for a felony crime called misapplication of payment by contracts, which is essentially a sophisticated form of financial fraud. According to people who have followed his story for years, Odom served 7 years in prison for these fraud-related crimes. 7 years. This wasn't just a mark on his record, it legally restricted what he could do in the business world for the rest of his life. Here's where it gets really interesting. In divorce papers filed by his ex-wife, Treshel Odom, she stated that because of his felony conviction, Odom was legally barred from doing business under his own name. So when he got out of prison and wanted to start over in the construction industry, he couldn't just open a company like a normal person. He had to operate in the shadows. She claimed he started his new construction business under a friend's name, which means that from the very beginning of his comeback, his entire business was built on a foundation of secrecy and deception. It was a necessary step to hide his criminal past from the public and his client, but it also set the stage for everything that would eventually destroy him. That shadowy construction company was called HMH Construction and Excavation and Concrete Company based in Idaho. Odom was the real owner and managing member, the man pulling all the strings, even though his name wasn't officially on the front door. For a while, this arrangement seemed to work. The company grew, and it was the money from this business that allowed him to get back into his passion for cars and eventually build the racing empire that landed him on Street Outlaws. But here's the thing about patterns of criminal behavior: they tend to repeat themselves. The same deceptive practices that sent him to prison the first time eventually came back to destroy him again. HMH Construction eventually collapsed and filed for bankruptcy. But as investigators called bankruptcy trustees started digging through the company's books, they found something alarming. They began looking into what they called fraudulent transfers of money. They suspected that Odom was taking money that should have been used to pay his creditors, the people, companies his business owed money to, and was instead funneling it to himself and his racing team. Specifically, the investigation focused on large payments made from the failing construction business directly to his racing partner, Jim Howe, This connects everything together in the most damning way possible. The money that funded his flashy television career and the money used to build his world-famous GTR was allegedly money that belonged to other people. His entire Street Outlaws persona, the image of a wealthy and successful businessman who could afford to play at the highest levels of racing, was built on the same kind of financial shell game that had landed him in prison years before. His racing career wasn't just funded by a successful business, it was allegedly a direct part of the financial crimes that led to his downfall. While John Odom was building his image as a successful businessman and family man on television, a completely different story was unfolding behind the closed doors of his own home. The smiling, confident racer that fans saw on their screens was, according to those closest to him, allegedly living a disturbing double life. The most explosive details came from his ex-wife, John Odom, during their divorce proceedings. Her accusations were far more shocking than any financial crime and revealed a man who was allegedly capable of horrific behavior. She claimed that he had raped her and repeatedly threatened her life. But her allegations went even further. She stated that he was carrying on relationships with nearly a dozen other women, including prostitutes. Their marriage was also at the center of a major national political scandal. Trashel publicly accused Corey Lewandowski, Donald Trump's former campaign manager, of sexually harassing her at a charity event in Las Vegas. It was a brave step for her to take, putting herself in the national spotlight. But according to reports, John Odom took her story and went to the media with it, without her permission, using her moment of vulnerability for his own purposes. Think about the psychology of this situation. In public, Odom was playing the part of the protective husband, standing by his wife as she faced down a powerful political figure. But in private, that same wife was accusing him of far worse behavior than what she had experienced from Lewandowski. He was publicly condemning the actions of one man, while allegedly engaging in much more horrific behavior himself. The allegations from his ex-wife weren't isolated incidents. As his life began to unravel, more disturbing stories started to surface online. One particularly troubling claim came from a young woman on Reddit, who posted that the very day she turned 18, John Odom began sending her messages, allegedly offering her $2,000 a month to have sex with him. Another user replied to her post, thanking her for her bravery and saying they knew he had been doing this for years, but that most women were too scared of him to speak up. These stories, combined with his criminal history and business failures, created a groundswell of negative sentiment that completely destroyed his reputation in the racing community. John Odom's time in the spotlight is over, and there's no coming back from this level of destruction. This isn't just about losing a racing career. This is about the complete collapse of every aspect of a man's life, piece by piece, until nothing was left but the truth. A financial death sentence of nearly $15 million has made it mathematically impossible for him to ever afford to race again. The dark shadow of Christopher Tapp's death at his Las Vegas party will follow him forever, raising questions about his character that can never be fully answered. His long history of financial crimes and the collapse of his construction empire have destroyed any credibility he might have had in the business world. And perhaps most damaging of all, the shocking allegations about his personal life have completely shattered the family man image he tried so hard to sell to the world. The fans who once cheered for his GTR now see him as a fraud, who used other people's money to fund a lifestyle built on lies. For John Odom, the street outlaw who once claimed to have the world's fastest GTR, this truly is goodbye forever. His story serves as a stark reminder that no matter how fast your car is, you can never outrun the truth. And when that truth finally catches up, the crash is always devastating. The gavel has fallen, the sentence has been delivered, and the checkered flag has been waved for the final time. John Odom's race is over, and he lost everything. What do you think about this whole situation? Did John Odom get what he deserved? Or do you think there's more to this story that we don't know? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'm genuinely curious about your thoughts on how someone can fall this far this fast. And if you want to see more deep dives into the dark side of motorsports, make sure you're subscribed, because I've got some incredible stories coming up that will blow your mind.